I'm about to make breakfast for me and Matt. Really a simple breakfast, but some of the things that I'm sharing are in mine and Jim's cookbook, Celebrating Southern Appalachian Food. If you've not seen the cookbook yet, I'll put that information in the description below so you can go check it out. First thing I'm going to do, I've got some bacon, and I like to do my bacon in the oven, so I'm going to go ahead and I've got the bacon, or the oven heating up for the bacon. I'm going to go ahead and get that in the oven. So now that's took care of. The bacon's in there. I usually cook it at about 420, 425. I just force something. Just depends on my mood, I guess. And as far as how long it takes, about 20 minutes, but it really depends on how you like your bacon. And if you like it really crispy, if you like it to have more of a give, and then also if you're, depending on how thick your bacon is. That bacon I'm using is pretty thick. We like the thick sliced bacon, but it's just one of those things, even just like cooking bacon on top of the stove, that you have to keep an eye on and watch. You have to watch. A lot of people put it on a rack. I don't ever do that. In the beginning, my friend Ginger taught me to do this. I put it on parchment paper, but somewhere I just quit doing that, and I don't ever use parchment paper now. I just put it right on, directly on my pan, and just keep an eye on it until it's done. Now the other two things I'm going to make, very simple breakfast, is I'm going to make some cornmeal mush. If you've never had cornmeal mush, think of grits, except you're using cornmeal. So you're boiling the corn, there goes my oven. If you're boiling the cornmeal just like you would the grits. So very, very simple. And that's a recipe that in days gone by in Appalachia, and in other places I'm sure, but especially here, that was a really, really common thing to eat. In those days, they grew a lot of corn. But the corn was different than what most of us grow today. Like, it was different than the sweet corn that me and Matt grow, the Silver Queen that we got to grow this year for the first time in many, many years. They grew a type of field corn, and that was a type of corn that would, hickory king, those come to mind. There's lots of other ones though, that dried well. So they would dry it in the fields, and then that way it would help them, because of course in those days they were trying to get through the winter, get through those winter months when there wasn't stuff growing to feed themselves and to feed their animals. So it dried well, and they could feed their animals, but they could also use it to feed themselves. Most of the way they used it to feed themselves would have been things like cornmeal mush, cornbread, of course, but they had it ground. They would take it to their local grist mill and have it ground, and then they would use it in that form, in that cornmeal form. I was looking for my cornmeal. I've got flour right here, but here's my cornmeal. This is the Boone cornmeal, Daniel Boone cornmeal, that I really fell in love with. Sam and Wanda brought me a big bag of it, so that was so kind of them. Anyway, that's mostly how they would eat it. Now, they also made hominy and different things with that dried corn, lots of different options for them. But in those days, like I said, when my dad, Pap, was a boy, that was just a really common breakfast, is that they would have cornmeal mush, because they had plenty of that. They would sweeten it with, and I know in some areas, thinking about grits, people don't sweeten grits at all. And then there's places where they do. But they would, in those days with the cornmeal mush, they might sweeten it with syrup. What we'd say syrup is just sorghum syrup made from sorghum cane. Of course, if they were lucky enough to have honey, they could use that. If they were lucky enough to have sugar, they could use that. Pap told me his mother, Marie, she would often, they would eat it for breakfast. She'd make a lot, and they'd eat it for breakfast. And then she would pour it into a container, a pan, like a long pan, he said. And then she would let it sit there the rest of the day. And then that night, sometimes for supper, what she would do is she would turn that out. It congeals, sticks together, kind of turns into a firm loaf there. And then she would slice it, and then she would fry it, and then they would eat that again, just in a different way for supper. And maybe have something to go with it, or maybe not have nothing to go with it. I guess it depended on how lean times were, how hard times were. And then they would so once it was fried, they would kind of eat it like pancakes, and they would put syrup over it. I have a video about that. In that video, it's 2 years old or something like that. I had never tried doing that before, and I did, and it turned out okay. It was good, it's tasty, but I didn't like that it didn't get brown. A lot of you in the comments said that you had family that did that too, but that they either dipped it in egg or rolled it in flour. I can't remember if I tried the flour or not. It's been so long since I did that video. Anyway, that was another way that they would have used their cornmeal mush. Now today, there's not that many people that eat it on a regular basis. Matt St. Wanda brought me the cornmeal. She loves it, so she still cooks it. And she says she likes it because it reminds her of being a little girl, growing up and her family eating it together. So I'm going to make that super simple recipe. I'll share it with you, really easy. Then I had some, if you watched our videos, you know, recently I had that wonderful, made crab applesauce for the first time. Crab applesauce. That's a good hard one to say there. And I had a little bit of it left, and so I kept some out so that we could enjoy it. So I'm going to use some of it. I'm going to sweeten it probably with the maple syrup over there and make a few little hand pies for me and Mac. I'm just going to bake them in the oven though, instead of frying them, going through that route. And I'll show you how I do that too. Matt's coming for his probably second or third cup of coffee. Third cup of coffee.
Second pot.
Second pot.
Second baby pot.
Yeah, well, they are little pots, yeah. It's a little bitty percolator there. So I got my bacon out. It's already over there. And because I do it in the oven, if you're wondering what do I do with the grease, if you're somebody that saves bacon grease, I still save it. I just pour it out of the corner of the pan here into my little container, and I still save it even if I do that. Sometimes I do that and then I pour that grease into a pan and then I make bacon gravy, but I'm not going to do that today, so I'm just saving it. So the next thing is I'm going to make those hand pies, which are super easy and simple to make. I didn't think, I should have been thinking ahead. I put the maple syrup in the crab applesauce to sweeten it, but of course what it did was also made it really thin. So I had to cook it down. I cooked it for about 10 minutes on high, making sure I was stirring it the whole time to thicken it back up. And while I was doing that, give me time to wash the dishes and clean up a little bit. But now I'm ready to start with them. So in the cookbook here, and I also have a video, so I can link to that video. But I use the same biscuit recipe for several different things that I make. So it's just the cream biscuit, so it's just heavy whipping cream. If you're lucky and you've got real cream, that would be even better. I mean real cream straight from the cow. But cream and self-rising flour. I like white lily, but you could use whatever you prefer. And you just mix, it's just 2 ingredients, and that makes your biscuits. I also make cheese biscuits, the recipe's in here. And then I also use it to make these baked hand pies. Now I have set a couple of videos about fried pies. You could not make this recipe and fry the pies. It wouldn't work. They would just fall apart on you. It's too tender of a recipe. You really need the Crisco and or shortening, whatever you want to use in that recipe. This one would not work for frying, but it works perfectly for bacon, for putting it in the oven, and it's super, super simple. So the cream biscuit dough, applesauce is one that we love, and probably the one I make the most often. Either applesauce or like apples that have just been cooked till they're thick. Granny was telling me yesterday I got her groceries and she seen where they had some Golden Delicious apples on sale at Save-A-Lot, and she wanted me to go get some of them, and I did. And then I got there, and as usual I said, you know, here's your apples, and there's 2 bags of them. And she said, well, I want you to take one of them home. And I said, well, no, I don't need those. I've got apples. And but she said, well, you ought to take them. They make the best fruit. So often in older people in Appalachia, you'll hear them, instead of just saying apple or applesauce, they just say fruit, like there could be no other. That is the only fruit, you know. So anyway, that's what Granny uses hers for too, and she likes to eat them just like we do in other ways too. And apple pies, you know, apple is really one of the most popular traditional kind of foods when it comes to Appalachian foodways, and that's true in other places I know, but here in Appalachia apple trees grow really well, and so it only makes sense that they would be used a lot. So for the baked hand pies, we're going to make the cream biscuit recipe, which as I said is just heavy whipping cream and self-rising flour, and the ratio is kind of depends on how you like your biscuits or how you like to do it, but really it's like 2 cups of the flour to 1 cup. So is the recipe of the biscuits. Now I'm not making that much today, so I don't have near that much, and I've made them for so many years that I just put the flour in there and then I put the cream until I think it looks like I want it to look. That's how simple it is. They're almost foolproof. Anybody can make them. I mean, anybody. But so we're going to make the cream biscuit recipe, and we're going to take a small amount of the batter on a floured surface. We're going to roll it out into a circular shape, and then we're going to place the tablespoon of applesauce or your favorite fruit preserve, or you could do other things too. Really the sky's the limit. In the middle of the circle, fold the dough over and seal the edges by crimping with a fork or your fingers to keep all that sweet goodness inside. Poke a few holes on the top To allow the steam to escape, place on greased baking sheet, bake at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes or until done, and you have a very tasty treat. Hand pies make a dandy dessert, snack, or breakfast. Like we probably most often eat them for breakfast, and then there's always some left over, so somebody ends up eating them through the day. And you can use like a small saucer or something to make your rounds really round. In my fried pie video, I use one of my Pyrex lids that goes on my bowls. Usually for these hand pies, I don't really shape them. I just get out a little dough, and whatever shape it ends up in, that's just what it does. But if you want them to look all neat and nice, certainly you could use a saucer, a lid or a bowl or something, lid off of a bowl like I do, or even a bowl turned upside down, and roll out your dough and then trace around that before you start actually filling them. Get my applesauce over here. I think I'm gonna have to find something to set it on to make sure. Let's see. I need to move I've got my cornmeal mush stuff ready here. I'm gonna move it over here. Move it out of the way so you can better see. So there's my crab apple applesauce. First I'm gonna mix up the dough. And if you ever add too much cream, you can add more flour. If you add too much, if you add too much flour and it's too stiff, you can add more cream. So it's really, really an easy recipe. I think that's going to do us right there. You can hear my table protesting as I shake it. Right there. And most of the time, I don't even get, for these, I don't get my rolling pin out. But I might today. That'll be more fancy for all of you. But often I can just kind of press it good enough for me. I go for rustic, I say, as long as it tastes good is the main thing. I'm going to have some more flour though. Get some of the wonderful sauce there. Fold it over. I'm going to have to get me a knife to trim away what we don't need. Those crimped edges are my favorite part, especially on both places. I mean, but whether you're frying them or baking them, and especially when the juices kind of escape and then they cook into that, they are so good. That one's kind of pitiful looking. Maybe I should go get my rolling pin and do better on the next one. We'll see. It does make it easier for sure. Ain't that terrible too? Sometimes I just don't want to go through the trouble of going to get it. May not have made enough. I may be looking for something else to put in them. That one looks much better. I didn't grease my pan either, but I think it'll be okay. I should have put some butter or some shortening or something down. Well, I got down to the last one. I had enough crab apple applesauce for all of them but one. So, can you open it for me, Matt? I've got Matt to get me just some jelly out, and I'll put it in the last one. What is that, grape?
Yep.
Grape. That'd be interesting. I don't think I've ever done that before, but it'd be interesting. We're just going to use jelly. I have used preserves and stuff, but I don't want to open a brand new jar of preserves just for one last pie. So we're just going to see how the grape jelly does. I imagine it will be really good. Matt should like it since grape's his favorite, right? Okay, I'm going to put these in the oven to bake, and then I'm going to get started on my cornmeal mush, and then we'll be almost ready to eat. I think the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slice us up a tomato. We have our tomatoes are dwindling, of course, this time of the year. We've got some tomatoes out there still going a little bit, but the Cherokee purples are almost totally gone for this year. So for the cornmeal mush, first I've got 2 cups of water. I'm going to pour that in and let it come to a boil. Now that it's boiling, I'm going to add a pinch of salt, and then I'm going to slowly pour the cornmeal in, just a little at a time, and that's just to keep it from clumping up. And then it's just a matter of letting it cook till it thickens, which doesn't take long, as you can see. Now, in those old days when my Mama Marie was making it, or even today for some people, they're just using just the cornmeal, just, you know, nothing else but cornmeal. Of course, I'm using a mix, so it's got the leavening and all that in there. But if you wanted to be really authentic, you could get just the straight cornmeal, and you can buy that even at the grocery store too. And you can see it makes just like grits or porridge or oatmeal, any kind of breakfast thing that you've had before. Now if our pies get ready, I think we'll be ready to eat. So that was the first time I've ever made the cornmeal mush with the Daniel Boone cornmeal. And it just got really, really thick. But what you can do if that happens to you is just add water. So I just added more hot water. I didn't have it boiling, but I just added more hot water, and then it's got much more creamier. So I guess that's a lesson for if you don't have the old-timey cornmeal. Just straight cornmeal is what I should say. If you don't have it, and you're using a mix like me, it may, depending on which mix you're using, you may need more water than that. But again, it's really simple. It's just the cornmeal and the water and a pinch of salt. So if it gets too thick on you, just add a little bit more water. It looks good. And these look good too. See how the stuff seeps out. Those are my favorite little bits when that happens. It'll be interesting to see how I can see the grape has really come out, because probably just melted and come out, wasn't thick like the crab applesauce, but it'll be interesting to see what it tastes like. But these look really good. Matt, I think we're ready to eat. Matt's got some maple syrup for his. That one's kind of stuck in the grape. This one right here is the grape. Put some butter in my mush there, and instead of like Matt, I'm going to get my favorite, which is sorghum syrup. This is some syrup actually made by Justin Metcalf out in Madison County. It's so good. I'm going to put it in there with my butter and mix it around. I'm dropping butter from somewhere. I can't wait to taste a little bit of it here. Creamy. And then who couldn't? I mean, the sorghum syrup's just my favorite. Really, really good. And goes perfectly, I think. It's weird how you get those things in your mind, but for me, I love sorghum syrup with tomatoes, so I'm in luck on that today. I guess I should try the grape one, although I don't really want to. I'm going to try a little corner of it. And whoever eats it later in the day won't mind. I'd rather have the crab apple. is good. Tastes like a jelly biscuit, which what you probably figure. Get this one and get one of those little corners there. Oh, so good. I love the crunchy corners. Really good fruit, as Granny would say. Delicious, and amazing to me still that it comes from the crab apple tree. I can't wait to keep doing that year after year now. I'm gonna get me one of our last Cherokee purples here. And I don't even care about the bacon, but I guess I'll get a piece of bacon. And this is just gonna be a true feast. I hope you enjoyed seeing this simple breakfast that I made for me and Matt. If you missed the information about the cookbook, again, I'll put it in the description below. Looks like I've even got enough left over. I can do like Mama Marie and pour it up and let it get solid and either fix it tonight for supper or maybe save that for breakfast in the morning. That would be really good. Let it go overnight. I'm always glad when you stop by to help me celebrate Appalachia. How is it, Dad?
Good.